Hey folks, in this day and age we're giving names to all kinds of conditions. I'm thinking more along the conditions of the personality, so things like Asperger's and autism, or conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or psychopaths, and all these new sort of conditions that are coming along that were once unknown, and now they're clinically acceptable diagnoses. And I always wonder, where were these people before? We must have had autistic people in the past. Well, I'm assuming we had autistic people in the past, but they were never diagnosed as autistic. They were probably considered to be either a little slow or antisocial or just generally peculiar or something like that. We didn't have a name for it. People with post-traumatic stress disorder would have been considered as just somebody who's having nightmares after a terrible event, and maybe that they're just not mentally strong enough to cope with it. It's just the psychologists now are starting to perhaps gain some understanding of the human condition, which is an infinitely variable spectrum. We've got all kinds of conditions. Dyslexic people, once upon a time, were just considered people who were perhaps not bright enough to read. But when we started to talk to them and try to understand them, we realised that the letters on the page were muddled up and their mind was working quite a different way to the traditional mind that seems to be able to read quite happily. So rather than dismissing them or telling them to go away or naming them as being stupid, we now try and help them to manage their condition. I suppose you could argue the same for people who are paranoid, for example. Maybe in the past, people who were paranoid were just sort of told to stop being stupid and pull themselves together and sort themselves out. So nowadays we have a better understanding of paranoia, and we can help people like that with psychotherapy or cognitive behavioural therapy. Our society and our culture is trying to learn, hopefully growing, to accept that not every mind is the same, and perhaps help with ways of managing these differences or understanding them, possibly even curing them, although that seems to be a very difficult thing. So that then got me onto thinking about the criminal mind. You see, at the moment we just see somebody as being a criminal as though it's a choice. They've chosen to be bad. They've chosen to be a car thief. They've chosen to be a burglar or something like that. How long will it be before a psychologist comes along and says, well, actually this person is on the criminal spectrum. They are wired such and put together such that their mind leads them towards criminality, which is an interesting idea. You see, if somebody is autistic or suffering from paranoid delusions, we offer them our sympathy, and hopefully as a society we hope to help them. But we still view criminals as just being bad people who have actually chosen to be bad, rather than trying to help them. So it brings me around to the idea of prisons. You see, if somebody chooses to be bad, then prisons are there as a punishment. You've done something wrong and you've chosen to do something wrong. Therefore, we are going to take away your freedom as a punishment. But what happens if you're naturally predisposed to being a criminal? Well, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we close the prison system. I don't want my car stealing, and as such I would like to think that if somebody is predisposed to stealing cars, that they will be pulled out of society to stop them from stealing cars. But how then should they be treated in prison? Are they a bad person, in which case we must give them harsh conditions? Or are they a person who has a disorder, like autism or paranoia, in which case we should be treating them, as in trying to help them understand the error or their difference and manage their difference accordingly, hopefully with the view that they can come back into society and my car will remain safe and they can have a full and better life? Or are they choosing to be bad? Are we using psychologists to provide the criminal person an excuse for being bad? Are we, by putting them in a prison that's comfortable and helpful and pleasant place to be, not giving them any motivation to stop doing things which society doesn't agree with? And it's a very interesting question. Personally, I lean towards the idea of trying to help people. I mean, prison for me, because I don't believe I'm criminally minded, works because I don't want to go to prison. I don't like the idea of being in prison. But if you're predisposed to that, what can you do? Well, we know from experience that people who steal cars, when they start out stealing them at 12 or 15 years old, will probably continue, even after times in prison, to continue to steal cars, which suggests that they're predisposed to it and that the criminal system isn't helping them at all. I do believe there will always be some people who are either evil, if you believe that criminals are evil, or so mentally different than the rest of society that they will have to remain incarcerated to protect the rest of society. But I still ask the question, no matter their crime, if they were born to be bad or circumstances have led them to be bad, should we be punishing them with harsh conditions, or should we be just incarcerating them to protect the rest of society? I don't know the answers to this yet, and I'm certainly not psychologically trained enough to give you a definitive point of view. And that's all it is a point of view. But that's my thinking on the matter.